Hello, my name is Gail Ellis and welcome to Picturebooks in European Primary English Language Teaching. I'm going to continue on our theme of friendship this month and the picture book Imaginary Fred. And I'm going to be talking about picture books and multiliteracies. But before I do that, I would just like to refer you back to Sandy's video last week where she talked about picture book as object. And she showed you her hardback copy of Imaginary Fred, which also had a dust jacket, and it had, do you remember the dust jacket had flaps? Well, I have the paperback version here, but I actually also have flaps. I have a front cover flap and a back cover flap. And the front cover flap gives me information about the story, and the back cover flap gives me information about the author and illustrator. This is quite unusual with paperback versions of picture books. And there's also another beautiful feature about this cover, which I'm not sure if you can see, but the title, Imaginary Fred, and the picture of Fred in the cloud here, these are embossed, which adds a beautiful tactile dimension to this picture book and to the cover. You can actually trace over the letters with your fingers and feel them, and you can feel the shape, the body of Fred here. So, for example, if you have a child who has a visual impairment, this would be a fantastic way for the children to read the story themselves using this tactile dimension and feeling the images and the letters. So thank you very much, HarperCollins, for these beautiful features to this picture book. So I'm going to be talking about picture books and multiliteracies. So as we know, our main focus when we use picture books in English language teaching is to focus on language, the teaching and learning of language. But picture books can be used to develop so much more than just vocabulary and grammar related to the theme of the story. They can be used to develop multiliteracies. So what do I mean by multiliteracies? Well, multiliteracies go beyond the traditional interpretation of literacy, which is the ability to read and write. They allow us to develop other forms of literacies by by interpreting and decoding information through other modes. For example, encouraging children to read the images, interpret the images, is an important means of communication. Information is often conveyed visually, and this will develop their visual literacy. By getting the children to read the emotional temperature of the illustrations and to empathize with the characters is also an important way of developing emotional literacy. Picture books also contain lots of cultural information, so we can encourage children to make to spot similarities and differences between what's represented in the picture book and in their own culture, and thereby develop their cultural literacy. And also there's lots of information usually about the natural environment, so they can develop nature and environmental literacy. Sometimes picture books come with trailers, which are also a valuable way of developing digital literacy. And finally, picture books allow us to help children develop learning literacy. And here I'm talking about things like using prior knowledge, activating prior knowledge, predicting, anticipating, hypothesizing, sequencing, ordering, reviewing learning, self-assessing learning, and all these important strategies are linked to learning literacy. So let's come back to our beautiful picture book, Imaginary Fred, by Ewan Colfer and illustrated by Oliver Jeffers. First of all, we can actually look at the cover. There we are, Imaginary Fred, and we have a little subtitle here or explanation. Just because a friend is imaginary doesn't mean they're not real. You could ask children to say what they notice about the writing, and they will notice that a combination of both upper and lowercase writing has been used here. You could ask them what impact that makes. Why do they think that Oliver Jeffers decided to use both upper and lowercase in this way? So coming into the storybook, I'm going to show you a little bit just to demonstrate a couple of things that we can help develop. So coming into the storybook, I hope you can see here, sorry, a bit difficult with the light. And we're coming here to the first double spread. You can see that on this page, there's the text, but I've actually put a piece of paper over the text. And the reason for that is that I want to focus the children's attention on the illustrations. And you can see that the illustrations are black and white line drawings. And you can, through questioning, you can ask the children what can they see, and they will tell you that they can see two men sitting on a bench talking, two people walking along a path, some children playing ball, two dogs together. We've even got two dogs playing together. Here we have two men playing chess together, and then the eye will zoom in to this solitary figure, and you can ask the children questions about this child here that they can see. How do you think he feels? How does he look? So they're also reading the emotions expressed on his face and empathizing with the character. And they'll say things like, he looks sad, he looks unhappy, he looks lonely, he's alone, and so on. Now the children may respond in their L1 or the shared classroom language. This really isn't a problem. It shows that they're developing their visual literacy, and you can recast and rephrase in English what they've said to you in their own language or the shared classroom language, which shows them that you've understood and that you are moving on and keeping the pace going. And we're working with both languages to come to a result. So what I'm going to do now, after all that prediction, you could ask the children as well, personalize the story. Have you ever felt alone? Can you tell us how you felt when you were on your own? And so on, and what you wished for. I'm going to remove the flap, and now I'm just going to read the first part of the story. Headaches are a pain. A bee sting hurts even more, but there is one thing that's worse than getting stung on the head by a bee on a rainy day, and that is loneliness. Being alone is no fun. The first 5 minutes are okay, but it's downhill from there. And if you're alone, you're alone. It's not as if you can wish a friend to life. Usually this is true. You can wish and wish until your hair stands on end, but no imaginary friend will appear. Unless, what do you think? Here we can ask the children to predict what they think predict how they think an imaginary friend can appear. So you've gathered their predictions. Should we find out? Unless the conditions are just right. If you add a little electricity, and here we have a statue here, and it's called Important Person. And there's a pigeon standing on his head, and there seems to be fish coming out of the sky. Maybe it's raining fish, I don't know. So the conditions are just right if you add a little electricity, or luck, or even magic. Then an imaginary friend might appear just when you need one. And we meet Fred for the first time. Here he is. And he's in blue, so we've moved from the black and white line drawings to the blue picture of Fred. An imaginary friend like Fred. Fred floated like a feather in the wind until a lonely little child wished for him. I'm going to move on now, but you can see that already we've started to encourage the children to read and interpret the illustrations, therefore we're developing their visual literacy. We've asked them to predict what they think is going to happen next in the story, or what the ideal conditions were. And we've also asked them to personalize the story. How do you feel if you're lonely? I'm going to move on here to Fred, who comes down to children when they wish him down, but as soon as they find a real friend, Fred fades and disappears. So poor Fred, we're empathizing here with Fred. Fred was glad that his friends found each other real friends to play with, but sometimes he wished he had a friend who would need him forever. He dreamed of a friend who liked reading, music, and drama like he did. He imagined them sitting together, reading adventure stories and looking for shapes in the cloud. That was Fred's dream. And we can see here that Fred is on his cloud and he's dreaming, and we have the visual image here of the thought bubble. And one day, a lonely boy called Sam wished hard for a friend when the conditions were perfect. Do you remember what those conditions were? A little bit of electricity, some magic, and some luck. Fred appeared and soon realized that Sam was the friend he had been dreaming of. So what kind of things do you think they would like to do together? So you can encourage children to predict what they think they might do together. Fred never had so much fun. Sam loved to read, just like Fred, and was most upset if he didn't get through at least one book per day. When they weren't reading, Sam and Fred would try to understand how the toilet worked. Now, I have a personal connection with this, because these are kind of things, aren't they, that we always take for granted. We don't question ourselves. Yet I had to do some serious questioning this summer when my toilet broke down, and I had to work out how the mechanism could be repaired inside. So I have a personal attachment with that image. They'd listen to music on Sam's dad's sound system, which had 13 speakers. Oh dear, neighbours downstairs. Or they would write plays and act them out for Sam's parents. So these are just some of the lovely things that Fred and Sam are doing together. What kind of things do the children like doing together with their friends? Do they have imaginary friends? So that's it from me today on the picture book and multiliteracies. I'll be back next month with another picture book. But we would love to hear from you on our Facebook pages and tell us how you've been using Imaginary Fred or any other storybook on the theme of friendship, and how you've used it also to develop multiliteracies. Bye.